something crucial just slipped out of the paddock, and it didn't come from a telemetry sheet or a secret FIA document. It came directly from Lewis Hamilton himself. After Australian Grand Prix qualifying, where Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team produced a massive 0.8-second advantage in a single lap, Hamilton openly questioned where that speed suddenly came from. And here's the shocking part. The 7-time world champion hinted at a possible compression ratio loophole in the new Formula One engine regulations. One that could unlock several tenths of performance until mid-season rule enforcement begins. If that suspicion is even partially correct, we may have just witnessed the real reason Mercedes detonated qualifying, and why the entire grid could already be racing a championship that's slipping away. When the 2026 season opened at the Australian Grand Prix, nobody truly knew the pecking order. Testing data from Bahrain suggested a tight fight between Ferrari, Red Bull Racing, and Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team. But when qualifying began, the numbers told a completely different story. George Russell delivered a blistering pole lap, while Kimi Antonelli locked out the front row, both laps nearly 8 tenths faster than Isaac Hadjar in the Red Bull, and just ahead of Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. In modern Formula One, where qualifying margins are usually measured in hundredths, a gap that large is almost unheard of. But here's where things become suspicious. During pre-season testing, Mercedes never showed this level of one-lap pace. Their long runs looked competitive, but their qualifying simulations were nowhere near 8 tenths clear. Yet suddenly, in Melbourne, the car could turn up a level of performance nobody had seen before. As Hamilton himself admitted, even he doesn't fully understand it. And that raises the uncomfortable question circulating quietly through the paddock. What if Mercedes didn't suddenly get faster, but simply discovered a legal way to unlock hidden power that other teams can't access yet? Before we dive deeper, join the Formula Story family by hitting that like button and subscribing, because here we break down the most fascinating F1 facts and the hidden truths behind the scenes. So, let's take a closer look. Let's start with the number that stunned the entire paddock: 0.8 seconds. In the current era of Formula One, that kind of qualifying margin usually signals something extraordinary. It's not just better aerodynamics or a slightly stronger setup window. It usually means either a revolutionary technical breakthrough or a loophole nobody else has fully exploited yet. And that's where Hamilton's comment becomes incredibly important. During interviews after the Australian Grand Prix, the Ferrari driver openly speculated about something the paddock has been whispering about since pre-season testing: the compression ratio loophole in the new 2026 power unit regulations. Now, let's break this down technically. Under the new regulations, the internal combustion engine must run a maximum compression ratio of 16.1 to 1. This ratio determines how tightly the air-fuel mixture is compressed inside the cylinder before ignition. Higher compression means greater thermal efficiency, which translates directly into more power per unit of fuel. But the rule book originally had a critical oversight. The compression ratio was only tested when the engine was cold, at ambient temperature. Here's the engineering trick. When an engine runs hot, materials expand. If the combustion chamber geometry changes slightly under operating temperatures, the effective compression ratio can increase beyond the nominal 16.1 limit without technically failing the cold inspection test. In other words, an engine that passes FIA inspection in the garage could potentially produce higher compression and therefore more power once it's at race temperature. And according to early paddock reports, 2 manufacturers were believed to have mastered this effect: Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team and Red Bull Racing's new powertrain division. The FIA clearly realised the potential advantage. That's why a hot engine test was introduced to measure compression ratio under real operating temperatures. Initially, the regulation change wasn't supposed to arrive until August. But after intense lobbying from rival manufacturers, including Ferrari, the FIA moved the enforcement date forward to June, which means something incredibly important. If Mercedes truly has a compression-based advantage, they could enjoy it for roughly the first 7 races of the season. And in modern Formula One, 7 races can define an entire championship. Let's put this into perspective. If a team has 0.7 to 0.8 seconds advantage in qualifying, that almost guarantees front-row lockouts on most circuits. Starting first and second dramatically increases your probability of winning races, especially on tracks where overtaking is limited. Even Hamilton admitted the potential impact. "If they have a few months of that, then the season's done," he said. He later softened the statement, clarifying it wouldn't literally end the championship, but the implication was obvious. Losing nearly a second in qualifying for 7 races could create a points gap almost impossible to recover. Now, look closely at what happened in Melbourne. Despite Ferrari showing stronger race pace early on, Mercedes still controlled the outcome. At lights out, Charles Leclerc actually challenged George Russell for the lead. Ferrari's launch performance and first stint pace looked extremely competitive, but qualifying position had already dictated the race narrative. And here's another fascinating detail revealed by Toto Wolff. Both Mercedes cars experienced battery energy deployment issues during the race. The ERS system wasn't delivering full boost at certain moments, something Wolff openly admitted after the race. Now pause for a moment and think about what that means. If Mercedes still achieved a 1-2 finish despite imperfect ERS deployment, then their underlying performance advantage might actually be larger than what we saw on track. Look again at the race footage. Notice the early laps where Russell and Leclerc are battling. Russell isn't just defending, he's controlling the pace through corner exits. That suggests extremely strong traction and energy deployment efficiency, which is exactly what you'd expect if the engine is producing higher thermal efficiency thanks to increased compression. And that brings us to the political dimension. Because if Hamilton is right, and Mercedes is exploiting a compression loophole, the FIA faces a very delicate situation. Allowing the advantage to continue until June effectively gives one team a multi-race head start in the championship. But banning it immediately would mean admitting the rulebook had a major technical flaw. So the compromise is what we're seeing now. Let it run temporarily, then close the loophole mid-season. But here's where the domino effect becomes massive. If Mercedes builds a 70 to 80 point lead in the opening races, the championship dynamics completely change. Ferrari would be forced to take strategic risks, aggressive setups, higher engine modes, potentially sacrificing reliability just to stay within range. Meanwhile, Mercedes could shift their focus toward development under the budget cap cycle, ensuring they remain competitive once the compression advantage disappears. And that's the real strategic brilliance here. If the loophole exists, Mercedes didn't just build a fast engine. They built a time-limited advantage designed to dominate the early phase of the season, exactly when points accumulation matters most. Look again at the body language in the post-race interviews. Wolff looked confident, but also cautious. He repeatedly emphasized that Ferrari remains a serious threat. That kind of messaging isn't accidental. It's classic paddock politics. Downplay your advantage while quietly collecting points. Meanwhile, Hamilton's comments may have unintentionally exposed the entire situation. By publicly mentioning the compression ratio topic, he essentially confirmed that rival teams are already investigating Mercedes' performance spike. Which means the next race, Chinese Grand Prix in Shanghai, suddenly becomes one of the most important races of the entire season. Because if Mercedes produces another massive qualifying gap there, the paddock will know that Melbourne wasn't a one-off. It was the first glimpse of a technical advantage that could shape the entire 2026 championship. So here's the question that could ignite the biggest debate of the 2026 season. Did Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team genuinely rediscover its dominance through engineering brilliance? Or did they simply exploit a regulation grey area that won't exist after June? Because if the compression ratio theory proves true, the opening races of this championship might already be tilting the title fight before rivals even have a chance to respond. But what do you think? Was Mercedes' Melbourne dominance pure performance or a temporary loophole advantage? Write your opinion in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep investigation into the secrets of the Formula One paddock.